The village of Kavanskaya was a forgotten dot on the edge of eastern Siberia, a place where civilization gave way to the endless Russian taiga. It was home to only the most resilient, those who braved winters that turned the world into a land of ice and deadly silence. On a January morning, with the temperature at 40 below zero, 80-year-old Yekaterina Dmitrievna woke before dawn. This was her routine for the last 60 years. Ever since she'd moved to this unforgiving land, her body, hardened by constant work, was a marvel of endurance. Her face, a roadmap of deep wrinkles, held grey eyes that still burned with the fire of a woman who had outlived war, famine, and her entire family. Retirement was a foreign concept. Every day held a list of essential tasks: fetch water from the frozen well, feed the chickens, and check the traps that provided her food. But that morning, something felt wrong. The forest's usual silence was tense, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Yekaterina knew this land. She sensed the unspoken warnings. Pulling on her felt boots and layers of fur, she grabbed her old Rafala keepsake from her husband and stepped outside for her morning patrol. That's when she heard it. Not a lone wolf's howl, but a deafening chorus. Hundreds of voices, united in a symphony of hunger and fury. Wolves. But this wasn't a normal pack. It was a monstrous army, driven together by a severe drought and a brutal winter. The sound was coming from a clearing near the frozen river, less than a kilometer away. Yekaterina moved through the deep snow with a steady, determined pace. The rifle felt heavy but familiar in her wrinkled hands. As she crested a small rise, what she saw made her heart, a veteran of countless hardships, race for the first time in years. In the clearing below, surrounded by a swirling sea of grey and brown fur, was a Siberian tiger. Even wounded, even desperate, the animal was magnificent. Its orange and black stripes were a brilliant slash of color against the blood-stained snow. The great cat was on its side, one hind leg bent at an unnatural angle, and circling it, growing tighter by the second, were hundreds of wolves, moving with the cold coordination of predators. The wolves attacked in calculated waves, testing the tiger's failing defenses. Each charge was met with a roar that still held enough power to make them flinch, but it was clear the tiger was losing. Blood streamed from wounds on its neck and flanks. It swiped with its massive front paws, claws tearing through the air. But every movement cost precious energy it no longer had. Yekaterina watched with the brutal practicality of someone who understood the tiger's law. Normally, she would never interfere. Nature has its own cruel, necessary rhythm. But this wasn't natural. The pack was too big, swollen by famine, and the tiger, it was a symbol of something she felt deep in her bones. It was resistance, a refusal to vanish quietly into the snow. With a resolve that defied her age, she descended into the clearing. She fired her rifle into the air. The blast tore through the frenzy. The nearest wolves turned, startled. She reloaded, fired again, and then again. Some wolves backed off, but most, crazed by hunger, simply redirected their attention. She was now part of the equation. A group of wolves broke off and started moving toward her, their yellow eyes fixed on the small human who dared to stand in their way. Yekaterina planted her feet and kept firing, now aiming at the ones that got too close. Her aim was deadly. Wolves fell, but more surged forward. Then the rifle clicked empty. She flipped the gun, gripping it by the barrel like a club. The first wolf that lunged met the wooden stock with a crack. The second latched onto her thick sleeve, tearing fabric but finding no flesh. She kicked it hard, her boot connecting with its ribs. Behind her, the tiger watched with half-closed eyes. The wolves were now divided, some still on the tiger, others moving to take down this new, stubborn threat. Yekaterina started to scream. Primal, guttural sounds of pure defiance. She charged forward, swinging the empty rifle with a force her body shouldn't possess, fueled by a lifetime of survival. From her coat, she pulled out an old Soviet-era emergency flare. She lit it. The brilliant red light and piercing whistle cut through the chaos. The wolves She threw the flare into the densest part of the pack, scattering them in momentary panic. Seizing the chance, she moved to the tiger's side, placing herself between the fallen cat and the predators. She then pulled out her last resource, a waterproof blanket. She spread it wide, waving it violently, making herself look bigger, the fabric cracking in the wind. The next few minutes were a blur. More wolves charged, were repelled, and retreated. Yekaterina was now bleeding from scratches and a bite on her leg, but she didn't stop. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but the iron will that had kept her alive for 8 decades refused to break. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Perhaps the cost was too high, with over 20 wolves now lying dead or wounded. Perhaps it was the sheer, illogical persistence of this one human. The pack's collective energy finally broke. They began to retreat, their howls of frustration echoing as they vanished back into the trees, leaving only silence and the red-stained snow. Yekaterina collapsed to her knees, utterly exhausted, but her mind was still sharp, now focused on the tiger. The great cat watched her. There was no gratitude, but there was no aggression either. Just a quiet recognition between two survivors who had stared down death and won. With her last ounce of strength, Yekaterina made it back to her village and returned with help. Vets were radioed in from a reserve hundreds of kilometers away. The tiger was transported, treated, and eventually released into a protected area. Yekaterina recovered from her injuries, her iron constitution holding true once more. When people asked why she did it, why she risked everything for a wild animal, she just shook her head. How could she explain it to those who didn't understand the tiger? The truth lived in her tired eyes. Empathy doesn't care about age or species or logic. It sees the choice to see the value in another life and to act when the world becomes too cruel. On that frozen Siberian morning, an 80-year-old woman taught a lesson no book ever could. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is love, transformed into action, even when every part of you wants to give up. And sometimes that is all it takes to change a story. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of incredible human spirit.